It begins on a Tuesday in the month of November in the year 2027. The world continues its restless rotation, indifferent to the silent machinations of the deep sky. Inside the subterranean tunnels of the Large Hadron Collider, deep beneath the border of Switzerland and France, the massive detector known as the ATLAS system hums with a quiet, sterile intensity. It is an architecture of supreme human ingenuity, a cathedral of magnets and sensors designed to catch the whispers of the primordial universe. But on this morning, it does not find a new particle or a rift in the fabric of the known. It finds a ghost. A lone technician sits before a bank of monitors in a room where the air is filtered and the temperature is kept at a constant chilling level. There is a coffee cup on the desk, half empty and growing cold, a relic of a long night spent watching the static of the cosmos. A soft blue glow illuminates a face weary from the graveyard shift, eyes heavy with the weight of routine. Then, it appears, a single, solitary pixel on a screen designed to map the invisible. It is a data point that should not exist. It is a flicker of light from a coordinate in the void where there is nothing but the black expanse of the interstellar medium. The technician does not gasp. There is no sudden realization of doom, no cinematic music to herald the catastrophe. There is only a slow, creeping confusion. The system is recalibrated. The sensors are checked for a malfunction. Yet the pixel remains, unmoving and absolute. It is a pinprick of infinite density, a signature of something that defies the laws of the world we thought we understood. This single point of light is the first syllable of a sentence that will conclude the story of humanity. It is the end of history, captured in the cold logic of a silicon chip. To understand what the ATLAS system has detected, we must leave the sterile comfort of the laboratory and look toward the edge of the sky. Far beyond the orbit of the moon, moving through the freezing dark of the abyss, is a traveller from a dead epoch. This is not a comet. It carries no tail of ice and dust to warn the inhabitants of the Earth. It is not an asteroid of silicate rock or iron. It is a needle forged in the heart of a dying giant, a sliver of degenerate matter so dense that a single teaspoon of its substance would weigh more than the mountains of the Himalayas. It is 19 kilometers long, a slender, dark spine of neutronium propelled by the inexorable gravity of an ancient catastrophe. It is a cosmic splinter, a remnant of a star that collapsed into itself billions of years ago, long before our sun was ignited or the oceans of our world were formed. It moves with a terrifying, silent momentum. It does not tumble or rotate. It points directly at us, a silent sentinel of the void that has been travelling through the vacuum for eons, crossing the light years with the patience of a predator. Now, perform a thought experiment. Do not visualize a collision. Do not think of a rock crashing into the ocean or the apocalyptic fire of a prehistoric impact that wiped the dinosaurs from the face of the planet. Instead, close your eyes and imagine a surgical procedure on a planetary scale. Picture the Earth as a soft, translucent cell, a fragile orb of water and life suspended in the dark. Now visualize a needle of infinite hardness, polished by the vacuum of space, approaching with the clinical precision of a scalpel. The needle of degenerate matter does not hit the atmosphere so much as it unzips it. It is so dense, and its mass so concentrated, that it does not create a shockwave in the way a mountain of rock would. It pierces the nitrogen and oxygen of our sky like a needle through a veil of silk. There is no sound at first. There is only a streak of light, a line of pure white heat that bifurcates the horizon. As it descends, the very air is ionized, stripped of its electrons, turning into a trail of glowing plasma that stretches from the edge of space to the surface of the soil. If you were standing in its path, you would not see a falling star. You would see a vertical line of impossible brilliance, a geometric incision into the blue. It is a surgical incision into the planet. The needle does not stop at the crust. It does not shatter upon impact with the granite and basalt of the Earth. It is far too dense for that. Instead, it sinks. It enters the ground with the same ease that a hot wire passes through a block of wax. It travels through the soil, through the ancient layers of sedimentary rock, through the deep reservoirs of groundwater, and begins its descent into the mantle. The Earth, for all its vastness and its billions of years of history, is suddenly revealed to be nothing more than a soft organic fruit. We have spent our brief epoch building cities, writing symphonies, and mapping the stars, believing our home to be an unshakable fortress. We have fought wars over patches of dirt and dreamed of eternal empires. But the cosmos is a ruthless machine, and we are merely a thin layer of biological dust clinging to the surface of a sphere that is now being unravelled by a sliver of dead star matter. The technician in the ATLAS facility looks at the data once more. The trajectory has been calculated, the speed is confirmed, the mass is staggering. There is a moment of profound silence as the realization sinks in. The pixel on the screen is not a glitch, it is the arrival of the void. The needle is now only hours away from the upper atmosphere. In the city outside, people are waking up. They are making breakfast, walking their dogs, and worrying about the trivialities of their lives. They are unaware that the needle is already touching the edge of the sky. This is the scale paradox of our existence. We live in the realm of the medium, the comfortable middle ground between the quantum and the cosmic. We measure our lives in decades and our world in kilometers, but we are surrounded by an abyss that operates on a scale of billions and trillions. The universe does not hate us. It does not even notice us. It is merely a tapestry of energy and matter, and sometimes a stray thread of that tapestry, a 19-kilometer needle of degenerate matter, happens to cross the path of a small blue world. The incision has begun. The sky's been cut open. The silent detection by the ATLAS system was the last warning we would ever receive, a final whisper from the machine before the music of our civilization is silenced by the inexorable logic of the cosmos. As the needle sinks deeper into the heart of the world, the Earth itself begins to groan, not with the sound of a collision, but with the sound of a planet being structurally compromised. The tapestry is beginning to unravel, and we are the witnesses to our own oblivion, standing at the precipice of a horizon that has no tomorrow. This is the first movement of the symphony of our disappearance. The void has reached out, and its touch is as cold as the interstellar dark. To understand the silence of the present, we must look back across the brief span of 3 decades to a moment when we are merely witnesses to the violence of the heavens, rather than its victims. In the middle of July 1994, the human species looked through the glass of its telescopes and saw the face of the king of planets bruised by the clockwork of the cosmos. This was the arrival of the comet Shoemaker-Levy 9. Before this moment, our understanding of the solar system was coloured by a quiet, perhaps arrogant, sense of permanence. We saw the planets as eternal sentinels, fixed in their orbits like jewels in a museum case. We believed the era of great catastrophes was a relic of the primordial past, a violent childhood that the universe had long since outgrown. But the universe is not a museum. It is a ruthless machine of kinetic energy. Imagine, for a moment, that you're not here on this fragile world, but suspended in the crushing, hydrogen-rich clouds of Jupiter. You're watching a freight train of 21 distinct fragments, the shattered remains of a single icy wanderer as they descend from the void. These fragments were not merely rocks, they were remnants of the beginning of time, torn apart by the tidal forces of the giant planet until they formed a string of pearls. When they struck, they did not simply disappear. Each impact released energies that defied our terrestrial comprehension, creating plumes of fire larger than the Earth itself and leaving dark, soot-like scars across the Jovian atmosphere that lingered for months. From our vantage point on Earth, we watched this through the lens of the Hubble Space Telescope and the eyes of the Galileo probe. We were safe. We were the voyeurs of an interstellar car crash. We treated the event as a grand scientific curiosity, a rare opportunity to study the chemistry of an alien atmosphere. We felt the thrill of the spectator, protected by the vast gulf of 700 million kilometers of empty space. But in that week of 1994, the tapestry of the cosmos shifted. The universe transitioned from a gallery of distant flickering lights into a gallery of kinetic projectiles. We realized, perhaps for the first time in the modern epoch, that the peace of our solar system was an illusion, sustained only by the vastness of the distances between things. Now, as the needle of degenerate matter sinks into our own crust, that illusion has finally and irrevocably shattered. The thought experiment has become the reality. We are no longer the astronomers at the South Pole, watching the distant fires of Jupiter with cold detachment. We are the ones inside the target. This realization brings us to the profound vulnerability of our home. We have always thought of the Earth as a solid, dependable foundation. We walk upon the ground and feel its weight, its ancient stability. But from a cosmic perspective, the Earth is not a fortress. It is a thin scab of cooling rock stretched over a raging furnace of molten iron and nickel. Our entire civilization, every empire ever built, every child ever born and every word ever written, has existed upon this precarious layer of silicate. We are like microbes living on the surface of a cooling loaf of bread, unaware that the interior is still glowing with the heat of creation. The needle that now penetrates our world does not care for the thickness of our mountains or the depth of our oceans. It treats the granite and the basalt as if they were mist. As it descends, it reminds us that the crust is merely a temporary state of matter, a fragile boundary between the freezing void of the abyss and the hellish heat of the mantle. We are a world of surface dwellers, clinging to a thin ribbon of habitability, oblivious to the fact that we are surrounded by forces that could unmask our fragility in an instant. For eons, we have looked at the moon and the cratered faces of Mars and Mercury, seeing them as graveyard worlds, victims of a violent history that we had somehow escaped. We viewed the craters of the moon as historical records, like the fossils of a long-dead beast. But Shoemaker Levy 9 was a warning that the beast was still hungry. It was a demonstration that the mechanism of the cosmos is still in motion, and that we are not the masters of the machine. We are merely components that have not yet been caught in the gears. The transition from observer to victim is the ultimate existential pivot. In 1994, we saw the fireballs on Jupiter and felt a sense of awe. We marvelled at the scale of the catastrophe. But when the catastrophe is personal, when the needle is cutting through your own soil, the awe evaporates into a cold, paralysing dread. The scale paradox becomes an intimate betrayal. We see now that the universe does not provide a sanctuary for consciousness. It merely provides a temporary clearing in a forest of falling trees. As the needle reaches the deeper layers of the Earth, the heat generated by its passage begins to radiate outward. This is not the heat of a fire we can extinguish. It is the heat of friction on a planetary scale. The rock itself is being forced to yield, to flow like liquid under the pressure of an object that belongs to the realm of dead stars. The symphony of our history is being drowned out by the low-frequency groan of the planet's internal structure being compromised. We are forced to confront the truth that we are a sentinel species that failed its watch. We spent our centuries looking at each other, fighting over the arrangement of dust on our small patch of the tapestry, while the abyss was preparing its response. The 1994 impact was the opening movement, a distant rumble of thunder that we chose to interpret as music. We believed that by observing the catastrophe, we had somehow mastered it. We thought that by naming the comet, we had tamed the void. But the void is not interested in names. It is interested only in the inexorable laws of mass and velocity. The needle continues its descent, unravelling the layers of our world with the same cold precision that the fragments of Shoemaker Levy 9 used to unravel the clouds of Jupiter. The difference is that there is no one left to watch this impact from a safe distance. There is no Hubble telescope in the orbit of Mars to record the bruises on the Earth. There is only the silent witness of the ATLAS facility and the billions of us who are now realizing that we are part of the experiment. The Earth is being revealed for what it truly is, a small, soft fruit in a garden of falling stones. The scab is breaking. The furnace beneath is being stirred. And as the needle enters the heart of the world, we are left to contemplate the terrifying beauty of our own oblivion, a final, majestic chord in the symphony of the cosmos that we once thought we understood. The echo of Jupiter has finally reached us, and it is a sound that will never end, for there will be no one left to hear the silence that follows. To comprehend the nature of the intruder, one must first abandon the terrestrial intuition of speed and force. We exist in a world of low velocities, a slow-motion existence where air is a ghost, and solid rock is a permanent foundation. But the needle operates within a different echelon of reality. It moves at 72 kilometers per second. At this velocity, The very definitions of solid, liquid, and gas begin to dissolve. This is the hypervelocity threshold, a frontier where the mechanical strength of materials becomes irrelevant. Whether the needle is forged from the densest tungsten or the most fragile ice, at 72 kilometers per second, it ceases to be a mere object and becomes a concentrated delivery of pure physics. It is an expression of kinetic energy so profound that it mimics the behavior of a high-energy particle in a cosmic accelerator, yet it possesses the macroscopic mass to rewrite the geography of a world. The atmosphere, which we perceive as a gentle cradle of life, reacts to the needle not as a gas, but as a wall of unyielding granite. In the microseconds of its transit through the exosphere and troposphere, the needle does not merely move through the air, it compresses it with such violence that the atoms themselves are stripped of their electrons. A sheath of incandescent plasma forms around the leading edge, a shroud of light brighter than 1,000 suns, signalling the arrival of a force that the planet's biological history has no vocabulary to describe. This is the ruthless machine of the cosmos in its most efficient form. The needle is not cutting through the sky, it is unravelling the fabric of the medium it traverses. Consider the scale of the energy being focused here. To understand the needle is to perform a mental experiment in the extreme. Imagine an entire mountain range, billions of tons of ancient rock and eternal snow, and then imagine that entire mass being compressed, refined, and sharpened into a point no wider than a single human hair. This is the scale paradox that defines the penetrator. All the potential catastrophe of a continent-killing asteroid is focused into a singular, infinitesimal vector. The kinetic energy does not dissipate outward in a broad, blunt impact. It is injected directly into the heart of the world. This is not the hammer blow of a god, it is the needle of a cosmic surgeon, though the surgery it performs is one of total erasure. As the needle strikes the surface of the Earth, the laws of classical mechanics give way to the fluid dynamics of a nightmare. Because it travels many times faster than the speed of sound within the crust, the rock has no time to move out of the way. There is no sound of impact, for the object outruns the very vibrations it creates. Instead, the crust behaves like a liquid. The needle sinks into the solid earth as easily as a hot wire passes through a block of wax. But the wax does not merely melt, it vaporizes. The friction generated by this passage is not a warmth we can comprehend. It is a thermal event that rivals the temperatures found in the core of a star. The kinetic energy, once a property of motion, is converted with inexorable precision into thermal radiation. The needle is an engine of entropy, turning the orderly structure of our planet's layers into a chaotic, expanding abyss of heat and light. We often think of the Earth as an immense solid sphere, a fortress of iron and silicate, but the needle reveals the fragility of this fortress. By focusing its energy into such a narrow channel, the penetrator bypasses the planet's natural defences. It does not waste its power on the surface, where the energy could escape back into the void of space. It carries its destructive potential deep beneath the oceans, beneath the tectonic plates, into the very mantle that supports our world. It is a violation of the planetary interior. The needle is the messenger of a universe that does not recognise our borders or our history. It recognises only the conservation of momentum and the cold, hard mathematics of mass times velocity squared. The physics of 72 kilometers per second changes the nature of matter itself. In the wake of the needle, the rock is not just shattered, it is transformed into a state of matter that exists only in the hearts of dying stars or the first moments of the cosmos. The atoms are squeezed so tightly together that their electron shells overlap, creating a superheated wake that expands with the force of 1 billion nuclear detonations. This is the furnace of the void being brought to our doorstep. We are witnessing the transition of our world from a sanctuary of life to a laboratory of high-energy physics. The needle is the instrument of this transition, a sentinel of the abyss that reminds us how thin the veil of our stability truly is. There is a terrifying beauty in this precision. In the grand tapestry of the universe, such events are common. They are the mechanisms by which planets are forged and destroyed, the cosmic recycling that allows for the birth of new epochs. But to the witness, to the consciousness caught in the gears of this machine, it is a catastrophe beyond measure. We see the scale paradox in its final form, the smallest of objects bringing about the largest of silences. The needle, a mere splinter in the vastness of space, becomes the architect of our oblivion. It is the ultimate expression of the ruthless machine, a reminder that the universe is not a home, but a vast and indifferent engine of change. As the penetrator reaches the transition zone between the upper and lower mantle, the pressure becomes so great that the needle itself begins to lose its identity. It becomes a jet of superheated matter, a spear of liquid fire that continues to drive downward by the sheer inertia of its initial velocity. It is no longer an object, it is a process. It is a wave of energy that will not stop until every joule of its kinetic potential has been spent in the destruction of the planetary structure. The Earth groans, a low-frequency vibration that ripples through the core, a sound that would be heard as a funeral dirge for an entire civilization if there were anyone left to listen. We are forced to realize that our entire history, from the first spark of fire to the launch of our tallest rockets, has taken place in a brief moment of cosmic calm. We are the inhabitants of a clearing that the forest is now reclaiming. The needle is the first of the falling trees. Its passage through our world is a silent, majestic unravelling of everything we have built. The void does not hate us. It does not even notice us. It simply continues its inexorable work, using the laws of physics to rearrange the dust of the cosmos. The needle is the hand of that rearranging force, a concentrated point of destiny that has finally found its mark. In the face of 72 kilometers per second, there is no hope, no defense, and no sanctuary. There is only the witness of the end, a final lingering look at the majesty of a universe that is as beautiful as it is lethal. The symphony of the cosmos continues, but our movement is over, lost in the roar of the furnace and the silent, cold descent of the needle into the dark. The atmosphere, that thin and delicate veil of nitrogen and oxygen which has cradled life for eons, is the first to fail. To the creatures that evolved beneath its protection, the air is a ghost, a weightless and invisible medium of breath and flight. But to an object travelling at 72 kilometers per second, the atmosphere is no longer a gas. It is not even a liquid. At such velocities, the air becomes a solid wall of resistance, a barrier that refuses to be moved. The molecules of the upper thermosphere do not have the time to glide around the advancing prow of the needle. They are struck with such violence that they are instantly stripped of their electrons, transformed from a gentle breeze into a screaming wake of incandescent plasma. This is the breach. It is the moment when the sky, once a sanctuary of soft blues and drifting clouds, is pierced like a sheet of fine silk by a heated blade. In the span of the 0.04 seconds, the entire thickness of the planetary defense is rendered irrelevant. The needle does not merely enter our world, it tears through the fabric of the local reality. The compression at the leading edge is so extreme that the temperature leaps from the cold of the void to hundreds of thousands of degrees in a duration shorter than a human heartbeat. This heat is not a slow burn or a gradual warming, it is a flash of primordial energy that rivals the core of a star. The air ahead of the needle is squeezed into a disk of hyper-compressed matter, a wall of white fire that precedes the physical impact. We are witnessing the ruthless machine of physics at work, where the kinetic energy of a small mass is converted into a catastrophe that defies the scale of our everyday experience. As the needle descends through the stratosphere, the sheer pressure of its passage creates a shock wave that outpaces the sound of its own arrival. The sky itself seems to shatter. The blue is replaced by a blinding, malevolent violet, as the nitrogen in the air is ionized into a state of high-energy agitation. To a witness on the surface, there would be no time to process the sight. The light of the entry would reach the eye, but the brain would be extinguished before the signal could be interpreted. This is the scale paradox in its most visceral form. A single, slender sentinel from the abyss moving through the atmosphere so quickly that the air has no time to scream. The sky is not being pushed aside, it is being crushed into a state of non-existence. Below the thin skin of the air lies the solid foundation of the world, the granite and basalt that have stood as the silent guardians of the continents for millions of years. But as the needle nears the surface, the distinction between gas, liquid and solid begins to unravel. The intense pressure at the point of contact creates a zone of supercritical fluid. This is a state where the boundaries of matter are blurred, where the rock of the Earth no longer behaves like a stone but like a dense and chaotic plasma. Under the weight of this atmospheric compression, the very atoms of the crust are forced into a configuration that they have not known since the birth of the solar system. The granite does not shatter, it flows. It becomes a jet of superheated material, a remnant of a more violent epoch when the cosmos was a furnace and planets were nothing more than molten clay in the hands of gravity. The breach is not merely a physical event, it is a metaphysical transformation. The sky was the boundary between the known and the unknown, between the home and the void. By piercing it in 0.04 seconds, the needle has bridged the abyss and brought the indifference of the cosmos into the heart of our sanctuary. The veil of silk is gone, replaced by a jagged tear that allows the cold, mathematical reality of the universe to pour in. The atmosphere, which we once viewed as an eternal and unchanging part of our existence, is revealed to be nothing more than a fragile shell, a temporary arrangement of atoms that can be brushed aside by the inexorable momentum of a single cosmic fragment. In this fraction of a second, we see the true nature of the mechanism. The universe does not recognize the sanctity of life or the permanence of civilizations. It only recognizes the conservation of energy and the laws of motion. The needle is the messenger of this truth. As it drives deeper into the density of the lower atmosphere, the energy release becomes so immense that it begins to outshine the sun. The air is no longer a medium for light, it is the source of it. Every cubic meter of gas in the path of the intruder is ignited, contributing to a column of fire that stretches from the edge of space to the very surface of the sea. It is a symphony of destruction, a vast and silent explosion that marks the end of the world as a place of stability. The transition from the void to the solid Earth is a journey of mere milliseconds. Yet in that window, the entire history of the planet is recontextualized. We are forced to see our world not as a home, but as a target. The granite and basalt, once the symbols of mountain-born strength, are revealed to be as soft as water when confronted with the velocities of the deep cosmos. The supercritical fluid that now erupts from the point of contact is a testament to the fact that nothing is truly solid in the face of sufficient energy. Everything we know, from the deepest roots of the mountains to the highest reaches of the clouds, is subject to the same laws of decay and transformation. The needle continues its descent, a silver streak of oblivion cutting through the remains of the sky. It has already finished its work with the atmosphere. The air is now a swirling vortex of radioactive debris and superheated ions. The breach is complete, the sentinel has arrived, and as the surface of the world rises up to meet it, the final act of this cosmic collision begins. The Earth groans not in protest, but in the mechanical submission of matter to force. The tapestry of the biosphere is being unravelled, one thread at a time, by an instrument of the void that does not know it is destroying anything at all. It is simply moving, obeying the ancient commands of its own inertia, while the world beneath it prepares to become a memory. The solid Earth, which for eons has provided the foundation for every human endeavour, now offers no more resistance than the morning mist. As the needle strikes the surface of the sea and the underlying crust, the transition from gas to solid is not a collision in any sense that our physics would easily recognise. It is a continuous, fluid descent through a medium that has been stripped of its structural integrity by the sheer audacity of the intruder's speed. The granite and basalt of the oceanic floor, forged in the fires of primordial volcanoes and cooled over millions of years, are instantly converted into a supercritical state that is neither liquid nor gas, but a chaotic slurry of atoms pushed aside by an inexorable force. The needle does not merely move through the Earth, it unspools it, unravelling the very fabric of the planetary structure. Downwards it plunges, leaving behind the sunlit world and the fragile tapestry of the biosphere, driving deep into the lightless reaches of the lithosphere. Here, the story of the world is written in layers of stone, a geological record that spans hundreds of millions of years. But the needle is an illiterate traveller. It does not pause to read the epochs recorded in the strata. It ignores the fossilised remains of ancient civilizations of the sea and the forgotten mountains buried beneath the silt. To the needle, the entirety of human history and the pre-human world is a mere obstacle of negligible density. It is the sentinel of the void, an envoy from a realm where the laws of scale are written in the language of the infinite, and the resistance of a terrestrial planet is nothing more than a minor friction in its journey toward the abyss. As the needle reaches a depth of 35 kilometers beneath the continents, or a mere 10 kilometers beneath the churning ruins of the ocean floor, it arrives at the Mohorovicic boundary. This is the threshold where the chemistry of the world shifts, where the crust ends and the mantle begins. In our textbooks, this boundary is a profound discovery, a testament to the ingenuity of human seismic observation. It is the line that separates the fragile skin we inhabit from the vast, churning engine of the interior. But as the needle pierces this discontinuity, the transition is seamless. The change in density and mineral composition, from the silicate-rich rocks of the surface to the magnesium and iron-heavy peridotite of the mantle, is a distinction that the intruder finds irrelevant. The Mohorovicic boundary is not a wall. It is a ghost. It's a line drawn in the sand of a desert that is about to be consumed by a storm. Now the pressure begins to climb to scales that defy the imagination. At these depths, the weight of the world above creates a crushing environment where 500 gigapascals of pressure bear down from every direction. This is a force so immense that it should, by all rights, arrest the movement of any object. It is a pressure that could turn carbon into diamond in the blink of an eye and crush a mountain into the size of a pebble. Yet, the needle moves through this crushing weight with an indifference that is terrifying to behold. Its own internal density, a product of the exotic physics of the deep cosmos, makes the solid rock of the mantle feel like nothing more than a thin veil of silk. The resistance of the Earth, which we once viewed as the ultimate symbol of permanence and strength, is revealed to be a mere decorative painting on the surface of a far more complex and ruthless machine. We have always viewed our world as a solid, dependable sphere, a place of stable mountains and enduring continents. We built our cities on the assumption that the ground beneath our feet was a static foundation, but the needle reveals the truth of the mechanism. The Earth is not a monument of stone. It is a thermal engine, a swirling cauldron of heat and pressure that has been operating for 4,500,000,000 years. The crust is nothing more than the cooling slag on the surface of a molten sea, a thin rind of oxidized minerals that hides the violent churning reality of the interior. The needle is now moving through the heart of that reality. It is travelling through the plastic, flowing rock of the asthenosphere, where the temperatures are high enough to melt iron and the pressures are great enough to warp the very geometry of the atomic lattice. In this lightless abyss, the needle becomes the only point of order in a world of chaos. It is a concentrated shard of the void, a remnant of a process that occurred long before the sun was ignited or the planets were formed. It carries with it the cold, mathematical precision of the vacuum, a silent witness to the fact that the universe is not designed for us. It is not designed for life, for stability, or for the preservation of memories. It is a vast, mechanical symphony of motion and energy, where the collision of a single fragment with a world is nothing more than a statistical inevitability. The 500 gigapascals of pressure that should be a barrier are instead a testament to the scale of the tragedy. The mantle, which constitutes 84% of the Earth's volume, is being pierced by a needle that does not even know it has left the atmosphere. The journey continues deeper, toward the transition zones where minerals reorganize themselves under the weight of the world. The needle is now far beyond the reach of any human instrument, deeper than any drill has ever dared to dream, descending into the regions where the rock begins to flow like slow-moving glass. The silence here is absolute, broken only by the microscopic shattering of crystals as the needle displaces the matter in its path. There is no sound of impact here, no roar of fire, only the inexorable movement of a greater density through a lesser one. It is the ultimate expression of the scale paradox. a small, silent object unmaking a world through the simple application of momentum and mass. As we watch from the perspective of the cosmic narrator, we see the Earth for what it truly is, a fragile vessel floating in the eternal dark. The Mohorovičić boundary was the last line of defense for the concept of a surface world. Beyond it, there is only the deep, the hot, and the pressurized. The needle is now a part of the Earth's internal anatomy, a foreign body that the planet has no way to reject. It has transcended the limits of our geography and entered the realm of planetary physics. The decay of the old world is complete. The transformation of the planet into a site of cosmic catastrophe is well underway. The crust, that thin, decorative painting of soil and sea, is already a memory, a shattered remnant of a time when we believed the ground was solid. The machine of the universe continues to turn, and the needle continues to fall, deeper into the heart of the silent, waiting void. The needle now enters the vast, silent kingdom of the lower mantle, a domain that stretches for 2,900 kilometers toward the metallic heart of the world. This is the silicate journey, a descent through the bulk of our planet's mass, where the very concept of a solid Earth is revealed to be a beautiful, fragile lie. Below the thin rind of the crust and the churning plastic of the upper mantle lies the mesosphere, a region of such profound pressure and heat that the laws of physics seem to operate with a heavy, deliberate slowness. Here, the rock is not a brittle thing of mountains and canyons, but a dense, viscous medium that flows with the agonizing patience of eons. It is a world of silicate minerals, of magnesium and iron and silicon, crushed into crystalline structures that do not exist at the surface. And through this primordial sea of stone, the needle continues its inexorable fall. The journey through these 2,900 kilometers is not a simple transit. It is a violent redefinition of the planetary interior. As the needle accelerates, driven by the cold, mathematical laws of gravity and momentum, it encounters the terrifying viscosity of the lower mantle. At these depths, the rock is as stiff as steel, yet it moves like slow-flowing glass. To the needle, however, this resistance is an illusion. The kinetic energy concentrated at its tip is so immense that the rock cannot maintain its integrity. A bow-shock wave forms, a shimmering wall of compressed energy and matter that precedes the needle like a herald of the void. This shock wave does not merely push the rock aside, it liquefies it. The sheer friction and pressure of the needle's passage raise the local temperature by thousands of degrees in a fraction of a second, turning the ancient silicate into a momentary plasma, a searing trail of liquid fire that marks the needle's path through the dark. This is the mechanical inevitability of the machine. The universe does not ask for permission to alter the state of matter. It simply applies the necessary force. The needle is a surgical instrument, and the Earth is its patient, though there is no hope for healing here. The passage of the object is carving a permanent scar into the interior of the planet, a surgical track that cuts through the very engine of our world. This track is a vacuum in a world of infinite pressure, a momentary gap in the continuity of the mantle that the surrounding rock rushes to fill as soon as the needle has passed. But the damage is done. The microscopic alignment of the crystals is shattered. The thermal gradients that drive the slow convection of the mantle, the very currents that move continents and birth volcanoes, are disrupted by this foreign line of absolute destruction. The needle is a needle in the most literal sense, piercing the fabric of the planet and leaving a thread of chaos in its wake. As we descend deeper, the pressure reaches 100 gigapascals, a weight so monumental that it should be able to stop any motion, yet the needle does not slow. It is a remnant of a more violent epoch, a piece of cosmic debris that has transcended the limitations of planetary matter. It moves through the lower mantle like a ghost through a wall, though the wall is being torn asunder by its presence. The minerals themselves change as the depth increases. The needle passes through the transition zones where the atoms are forced into ever more compact arrangements, from the common silicates of the upper regions to the dense, heavy structures of bridgmanite and ferropericlase. These are the building blocks of the deep Earth, the silent sentinels that have held the planet together for 4,500,000,000 years. They are the foundation of the abyss, the material reality that anchors our existence, and the needle is unmaking them, one atomic lattice at a time. The scale paradox is here at its most profound. A single object, no larger than a human tool, is dictating the fate of a world that weighs 6 sextillion tons. The needle does not care about the majesty of the silicate journey. It does not feel the heat that would vaporize a city, or the pressure that would turn a mountain into a pebble. It is a part of the ruthless machine of the cosmos, a gear turning in a mechanism of infinite complexity and zero empathy. The mantle, which we once imagined as a solid, dependable foundation, is revealed to be a churning, vulnerable ocean of slow-moving fire. The needle's descent is a reminder that the stability of our world is a matter of perspective, a temporary lull in a storm of entropy that has been raging since the beginning of time. In this lightless realm, the concept of time begins to unravel. To the rock of the mantle, a million years is but a heartbeat, a brief pulse in the long history of planetary cooling. To the needle, the journey of 2,900 kilometers is a matter of minutes. This collision of timescales is where the tragedy of the Earth's dismantling becomes clear. The planet has spent eons building its internal order, organizing its layers and balancing its heat. The needle destroys that order in a moment of cosmic indifference. It is a cataclysm of efficiency. There is no waste in the needle's movement, no unnecessary energy spent on sound or light that does not serve the purpose of its descent. It is a silent, eternal fall toward the core, a voyage into the heart of the mechanism that governs the magnetic fields and the tectonic plates. As the needle approaches the final stages of the mantle descent, the rock begins to change again. We enter the D-double prime layer, the strange, chaotic boundary where the silicate mantle meets the iron core. Here, the chemistry of the planet becomes volatile and unpredictable. Slabs of ancient crust that have spent hundreds of millions of years sinking through the mantle rest here, a graveyard of lost worlds. The needle plunges through this graveyard, through the remnants of oceans and continents that were swallowed by the Earth long before the first ancestors of humanity walked the surface. It is a journey through the memory of the world, a descent through the layers of time that define our existence. The bow shock wave now begins to interact with the rising heat of the core. The liquefaction of the silicate rock becomes even more extreme, creating a plume of superheated material that follows the needle like a funeral shroud. The permanent scar being carved into the engine of our world is now thousands of kilometers long, a line of absolute disruption that connects the surface of the planet to its deepest reaches. The mechanical inevitability of the fall is now absolute. There is no force in the mantle that can stop the needle, no mineral dense enough to bar its path. It has become a part of the Earth's fundamental anatomy, a foreign spine around which the planet must now reorganize itself. We are watching the end of a world, not through fire or ice, but through the simple, inexorable application of planetary physics. The mantle, the vast silent reservoir of the Earth's energy, is being pierced by a messenger from the void, and as the needle nears the end of its silicate journey, as it prepares to leave the world of rock and enter the world of molten iron, we are left to contemplate the fragility of the things we call eternal. The Earth is not a monument, it is a process. It is a symphony of motion and energy that is being interrupted by a single, silent note of destruction. The needle continues to fall, deeper into the abyss, deeper into the heart of the silent waiting machine that is the universe. The void is not outside us. It is here, in the very heart of the world, and the needle is its most faithful servant. The boundary between the world of stone and the world of metal is a transition of terrifying violence and absolute clarity. As the needle breaches the Gutenberg discontinuity, it leaves behind the sluggish plastic movements of the silicate mantle and plunges into a vast shimmering abyss of liquid fire. This is the outer core, a subterranean ocean of molten iron and nickel, 2,200 kilometers deep, churning in the eternal dark. Here, the temperature soars to more than 4,000 degrees Celsius. Yet the pressure is so immense that this liquid behaves with a terrifying heavy fluidity. It is the magnetic heart of our world, the engine of our protection, and the needle has just pierced its primary valve. To understand the magnitude of this intrusion, one must imagine the outer core not merely as a reservoir of heat, but as a cosmic loom. Through the process of convection driven by the cooling of the planet and the crystalline growth of the inner core far below, this liquid metal rises and falls in great spiraling columns. Influenced by the rotation of the Earth, these currents twist into helical patterns, creating a self-sustaining geodynamo. This is the mechanism that generates the global magnetic field, a silent, invisible tapestry of force that reaches out from the depths, through the crust, and tens of thousands of kilometers into the void of space. This field is our only sentinel against the solar wind, the relentless stream of charged particles from the sun that would otherwise strip away our atmosphere and turn the Earth into a sterile, radiation-scorched wasteland like Mars. Now, imagine an intruder in this delicate fluid machinery. The needle is a shard of degenerate matter, a fragment of a collapsed star that possesses the mass of a mountain within the volume of a grain of sand. It does not belong to the physics of our world. As it enters the outer core, it is not melted or slowed by the 4,000-degree heat. Instead, it remains a point of absolute frozen indifference. It is a cold, alien mass, its temperature tethered to the depths of interstellar space, slicing through the swirling iron with the ease of a scalpel through silk. The disruption is immediate and catastrophic. As the needle descends, its extreme gravitational pull and its unnatural density create a wake of turbulence that shatters the local convection cells. Imagine a silver river that has flowed in a steady rhythmic cycle for 4 billion years, suddenly interrupted by a falling obsidian pillar. The liquid iron, which should be rising in smooth, majestic spirals to generate the magnetic lines of force, is instead dragged into a violent, chaotic vortex. The needle devours the kinetic energy of the core, turning the organized symphony of the geodynamo into a discordant cacophony of fluid friction. The magnetic field of the Earth is not a static shield. It is a living thing, constantly being renewed by the motion of the metal below. When the needle disrupts these currents, the effects ripple upward through the planet at the speed of light. On the surface, the first signs of the core's agony would be invisible to the eye, but devastating to the soul of our technology. The North and South poles, those ancient anchors of navigation and migration, begin to flicker and drift. The invisible lines of force that guide the sea turtle through the trackless ocean, and the bird across the continents begin to fray and snap. The planetary shield, the magnetosphere, develops vast weeping gashes. This is the scale paradox of our existence. Our survival, the very air we breathe and the water that remains liquid upon our surface, is entirely dependent on the rhythmic churning of liquid metal, 3,000 kilometers beneath our feet. We live upon the skin of a machine we cannot see, and that machine is now being dismantled by a messenger from the void. The needle is a catalyst for oblivion. It does not need to destroy the entire core to end the world. It only needs to interrupt the flow. As the needle sinks deeper into the liquid abyss, the sheer density of the degenerate matter begins to warp the very geometry of the core. The iron atoms, squeezed between the inexorable gravity of the needle and the crushing weight of the world above, are forced into new unstable states. The heat of the core, once a source of life-sustaining energy, becomes a weapon. The needle acts as a heat sink of impossible proportions, drawing the thermal energy of the planet into its dark, compact heart. This localized cooling creates massive downward plumes of solidified iron, artificial icebergs of metal that sink rapidly toward the center, further choking the convective engine. We are witnessing the unraveling of a planetary identity. The Earth is defined by its activity, by its ability to maintain a barrier between the internal heat of its birth and the external cold of the cosmos. The needle bridges that gap. It is a conduit of the void, a physical manifestation of the second law of thermodynamics, accelerating the entropy of the planet with terrifying efficiency. The geodynamo, the great churning heart that has beat for eons, is beginning to stutter. The magnetic threads that bind us to safety are being unspooled one by one. In this moment of cosmic tragedy, there is a profound sense of the Earth's fragility. We often think of our planet as an eternal monument, a rock that will endure long after we are gone. But the descent of the needle reveals the truth. The Earth is a process, a delicate balance of motion and heat that can be disrupted by a single, silent note of destruction. The liquid outer core, once the source of our protection, is now the stage for our dismantling. The iron sea, which should be the cradle of our magnetosphere, is being stirred into a terminal frenzy. The needle does not pause, it does not feel the heat, nor does it acknowledge the magnetic storms it creates. It is a servant of gravity, and its destination lies further still, through the liquid fire and toward the solid, crystalline heart of the world. It leaves behind a wake of cooling, chaotic metal, a dying geodynamo that can no longer shield the life above from the fury of the stars. The sky above, once protected by the invisible hands of the core, begins to glow with the haunting, beautiful light of a dying atmosphere as the solar wind begins its work. The aurora, once a rare and wondrous sight, now fills the heavens from pole to equator, a shimmering funeral shroud for a planet whose heart has been pierced. We are nearing the end of the descent. The needle has traversed the mantle and the outer core, carving a path of absolute disruption through the layers of the world. Now it approaches the final frontier, the inner core, a solid sphere of iron and nickel the size of the moon, under pressures so great they defy imagination. This is the foundation of the Earth, the primordial seed around which the planet grew. And as the needle prepares to strike this final solid anchor, we realize that the tragedy is not just the loss of our future, but the erasure of our past. The needle is not just killing a planet, it is unmaking a miracle. The symphony is ending and the void is waiting to claim the silence. But silence is not the first consequence of this terminal collision. Rather, it is a roar of thermal energy that defies the laws of the world we once knew. As the needle strikes the solid inner core, the kinetic energy of its impossible descent must find a new form. It can no longer move downward through the crystalline lattice of iron and nickel, for it has reached the anchor of our world. Instead, the momentum of its journey is converted in a single agonizing instant into raw, unadulterated heat. This is the thermal choke, a moment where the physics of motion surrender to the physics of fire. The needle, this cold and distant sentinel of the void, becomes a thermal engine of such ferocity that it threatens to unmake the very substance of the planet. The point of impact becomes the hottest place in the solar system, a localized sun ignited at the heart of the Earth. The needle itself, forged from materials that have survived the vacuum of the abyss, begins to dissolve. It does not simply melt, it transitions from a solid state into a superheated plasma, a plume of energy that begins to bleed back upward against the path of its own intrusion. The energy that was once focused into a sharp, piercing point is now unleashed as a radial shockwave of heat, a thermal tidal wave that rushes outward through the liquid outer core. The iron sea, already turbulent from the magnetic disruption, is now vaporized by the sheer intensity of this new sun. We are witnessing the birth of the burning plume. In the natural order of the world, heat rises from the core in slow, majestic cycles that take millions of years to reach the surface. This is the heartbeat of the planet, the gentle engine of plate tectonics and the slow drift of continents. But the needle has bypassed this ancient clockwork. It has delivered 1 billion years of thermal evolution into a single pocket of the deep Earth. The result is a massive upward surging column of superheated material that moves with a speed that mocks the geological timescale. This plume is not a gentle conveyor of warmth. It is a violent, incandescent spear of magma and metal, driven by a pressure that the crust above was never meant to contain. As this plume ascends, it devours everything in its path. The mantle, the solid yet plastic rock that makes up the majority of the Earth's volume, is flash melted into a liquid state. The plume acts as a thermal drill, widening the wound left by the needle's descent. It is a chimney of oblivion, rising through the depths of the world at a rate of kilometers per minute. The internal heat of the intruder, having overwhelmed the delicate thermal balance that has existed since the primordial epoch, is now seeking an exit. The Earth is no longer a planet. It is a pressurized vessel on the verge of a catastrophic failure. On the surface, the first signs of the thermal choke are subtle, then terrifying. The ground does not merely shake, It hums with a low primal vibration that can be felt in the bones of every living thing. The deep oceans begin to churn as the seafloor itself begins to radiate a warmth that was never meant to reach the abyss. In the centres of the tectonic plates, far from the traditional volcanic arcs, the Earth begins to swell. Great domes of rock rise toward the clouds, pushed upward by the rising plume beneath. These are the heralds of the end, the blisters of a world that is burning from within. Then the crust fails. The plumes, having breached the base of the lithosphere, erupt with a violence that defies human language. This is not the eruption of a single mountain, nor even the cataclysm of a supervolcano. This is the planetary-scale failure of the terrestrial skin. Across the globe, massive fissures open, thousands of kilometers long, as if the Earth itself is being torn apart by an invisible hand. From these rents, columns of fire reach into the stratosphere, carrying the molten remains of the inner core into the cooling air of the surface. The sky, already glowing with the dying light of the magnetosphere, is now choked with the ash of a world being remade. The surface is being remade in fire from below. The great cities, the monuments of human endeavour, the forests that have stood for eons, all are consumed by the inexorable rise of the magma. The atmosphere becomes a thick, suffocating tapestry of sulphur and carbon, trapping the heat and accelerating the planetary decay. The oceans, once the cradle of life, begin to boil away into the void, their waters turn to steam by the heat of the rising plumes. This is the ruthless machine of the cosmos in its most honest form. It is the second law of thermodynamics written in the blood of a planet. Energy moves from hot to cold, from order to chaos, and the Earth is the sacrifice on the altar of this universal truth. In this moment of total catastrophe, we find the existential pivot. We look upon the dying world and realize that we were never more than guests in a temporary sanctuary. The Earth was a miracle of balance, a rare pocket of stability in an abyss of chaos. But that stability was always a process, a delicate symphony of motion and heat that required every note to be in its proper place. The needle, by introducing a single discordant note, has caused the entire composition to unravel. The history of life, the billions of years of evolution, the epochs of struggle and triumph are all being erased by the simple, cold physics of a thermal dump. Yet, even in this oblivion, there is a haunting beauty. The plumes, rising into the darkness of space, create a crown of fire around the planet, a luminous remnant of what was once a home. The Earth is returning to its primordial state, a molten sphere of iron and rock glowing with the heat of its own destruction. We are the witnesses to this transition, the observers of a transformation that transcends our small, fleeting lives. The universe does not mourn the loss of our world, for in the vast scale of the cosmos, the destruction of a planet is but a common event, a flicker of light in the eternal night. The thermal choke is the final signature of the intruder. It is the mechanism by which the needle ensures that its arrival is not just a localized event, but a planetary transformation. The Earth, once a sentinel of life in the silent void, is now a beacon of fire signaling its own end to the distant stars. The internal heat, once the source of our protection and the driver of our geology, has become the agent of our dissolution. The balance is broken, the engine is failing, and the plumes continue to rise, carving a new and terrible identity for a world that has forgotten its past. The symphony has reached its final crashing crescendo, and the void is waiting for the last ember to fade. But beneath the surface of the burning world, away from the screaming winds and the columns of rising fire, a more profound and permanent transformation is taking root. While the crust shatters and the atmosphere begins its slow escape into the void, the true heart of the catastrophe is found at the very centre of the planetary machine. This is the second possibility, a destiny far more subtle and enduring than the immediate violence of the impact. The needle has not passed through the world. It has not merely left a wound. Instead, it has found its final resting place, lodging itself deep within the solid iron heart of the inner core. The inner core is a place of impossible extremes, a sphere of metal compressed by the weight of an entire world, vibrating with the primordial heat of the planet's birth. Into this sanctuary of iron and nickel, the needle has anchored itself, It is a foreign splinter, a tiny piece of an unknown abyss, now part of the Earth's own anatomy. Though its size is negligible compared to the vast volume of the planet, its density is an affront to the laws of our world. It is a concentrated point of mass, a heavy anchor dropped into the middle of a delicate mechanism. By coming to rest even a fraction of a mile away from the exact geometric centre, the needle has committed an act of gravitational sabotage that will echo for millions of years. The Earth is a sentinel of motion, a celestial gyroscope that has hummed in the silent darkness of the cosmos for 4,500,000,000 years. Its stability, the very foundation of every epoch of life, is a product of its perfect spinning balance. The planet rotates on an axis tilted at 23½ degrees, a precise angle that acts as the conductor for our seasonal symphony. This tilt is what allows the sun to migrate across the sky, bringing the spring thaw and the autumn harvest. It is the rhythm that has governed the migration of birds, the blooming of flowers, and the very rise and fall of human civilizations. But consider now the image of a child's toy, a silver gyroscope spinning in perfect equilibrium upon a glass table. It is a marvel of physics, stable and unwavering. But then, a single finger reaches out and brushes the rim. Or perhaps a tiny heavy grain of lead is glued to one side of the spinning mass. The harmony is instantly shattered. The steady, comforting hum turns into a frantic, uneven vibration. The axis begins to wobble, tracing erratic circles in the air as the object struggles against its own shifted weight. This is the fate of the Earth. The needle, by its mere presence in the core, has shifted the centre of mass. It has moved the very point around which the world revolves. The consequences of this orbital shift are inexorable and terrifying. The planet begins to tilt further, drawn down by the pull of the new concentrated weight at its heart. The North Star, which has stood as a silent guardian for navigators and explorers throughout human history, is no longer the anchor of our heavens. The celestial pole begins to wander, carving a jagged and unpredictable path across the tapestry of the stars. The sky itself appears to be falling as the familiar constellations shift and slide into new alien positions. The heavens are being rewritten by the cold, heavy hand of the intruder. As the tilt of the axis deepens, the very length of the day begins to unravel. A rotation that has lasted 24 hours for eons now enters a state of chaotic flux. The Earth, fighting against the imbalance of the needle, begins to stagger in its rotation. One day might stretch into 30 hours, the sun hanging motionless in a sulphurous sky, while the next day is shortened to a mere 20, the stars racing overhead in a frantic blur. The biological clocks of every remnant of life, tuned by billions of years of evolution to the steady pulse of the sun, are rendered obsolete. The world has lost its beat, its internal metronome broken by a splinter of the void. The seasons, once a predictable cycle of life and death, transform into a sequence of planetary catastrophes. With the axis pushed to extreme and varying angles, the poles are suddenly thrust into the direct, unrelenting glare of the sun for months on end. The great ice sheets, already mourning the loss of their cold sanctuary, do not merely melt, they vanish in a geyser of superheated steam. Conversely, the equatorial regions, once the sweltering, lush heart of the world, are plunged into a darkness that lasts for entire seasons. The jungles of the Amazon and the plains of Africa become frozen, silent graveyards, buried under a frost that never retreats. The rhythm of the world is now dictated by the needle, the gravitational anchor that has stolen the future. This is not a temporary disturbance, but a new and permanent reality. The needle will not decay, and it will not move. It is a part of the Earth now, an eternal passenger in our journey through the abyss. For millions of years to come, the planet will continue its erratic, wobbling dance around the sun. The oceans will migrate, drawn toward the new equator defined by the shift in mass, drowning entire continents and exposing the jagged primordial floor of the abyss. The atmosphere, dragged along by a world that no longer spins true, will erupt into winds of unimaginable ferocity, scouring the surface of any remnant of the world that came before. We are the witnesses to the death of a rhythm. We look upon the ruins of our world and realize that the catastrophe was not just the initial impact or the rising fire, it was the loss of the predictable, the destruction of the balance that made life possible. The Earth was a rare pocket of stability in a vast and chaotic cosmos, a place where the laws of physics conspired to create a sanctuary. But that sanctuary was always a process, a delicate arrangement of motion and gravity that required every note to be in its proper place. By introducing a single discordant note, the needle has caused the entire composition to unravel. In this moment of existential pivot, we see the Earth for what it truly is, a small, fragile machine drifting in an infinite night. The universe does not mourn the loss of our seasons or the change in our tilt. To the cosmos, the shifting of a planet's axis is but a common event, a minor adjustment in the great mechanism of the stars. But for us, it is the end of the only home we have ever known. The history of life, the billions of years of struggle and triumph, have been erased by the simple, cold physics of a gravitational anchor. As the plumes of fire continue to rise into the stratosphere and the world staggers in its orbit, we are left to contemplate the haunting beauty of our own dissolution. The Earth is becoming something new, a world of extremes, a planet of fire and ice, governed by a logic that is not our own. The sentinel of life is being remade into a monument of the void. The symphony has reached its final crashing crescendo, and the silence that follows will last for eons. The needle remains at the centre, a silent, heavy master of a world that has forgotten how to spin. The journey into oblivion has begun, and there is no turning back. We pull back now, retreating from the suffocating heat of the scorched atmosphere and the jagged shadows of the new broken continents. The perspective shifts, rising above the plumes of soot that shroud the world, until the Earth is no longer a landscape of memory and tragedy, but a singular luminous sphere suspended in the velvet dark. From this height, the catastrophe that has unmade our civilization is invisible. The fires that consume the cities of man are reduced to microscopic flickers, and the needle, that heavy gravitational anchor that stole our future, is nothing more than a speck upon a blue marble. We are entering the domain of the solar system, a vast and silent theatre where the laws of orbital mechanics play out with an indifference that is as profound as it is terrifying. The Earth, for all its complexity and the billions of years of biological evolution that have graced its surface, is revealed as a fragile vessel. We have spent our entire history believing the ground beneath our feet was a permanent, unshakable foundation, yet it is merely a thin, brittle crust resting upon a churning sea of molten rock. We exist upon a shell thinner than the skin of an apple, separated from the freezing vacuum of the void by a layer of gas so shallow that it would vanish in an instant if the sun were to breathe too heavily. In this cosmic scale, the shifting of a planet's axis or the impact of a celestial projectile is not a tragedy. It is simply a rearrangement of matter. The solar system does not blink. Mars continues its lonely crimson transit. Jupiter, the great vacuum cleaner of the abyss, maintains its ancient guard, its swirling storms indifferent to the death of the garden world it was meant to protect. Here, in the cold light of the sun, we encounter the scale paradox. We are small beyond comprehension, yet we are the only part of this ruthless machine that has developed the capacity to understand it. This is the concept of the witness. For 13,800,000,000 years, the universe expanded, cooled, and ignited without a single mind to perceive it. Stars were born and died in a primordial silence. Galaxies collided and merged in a dark, unobserved symphony. The cosmos was a mathematical certainty, a sequence of events following an inexorable logic, but it was a universe without a story. It was only when life emerged from the chemical-rich oceans of a small planet that the universe began to look at itself. Through us, the cosmos gained eyes. Through our mathematics, the stars were named and their distances measured. Through our suffering, the cold laws of physics were translated into the language of meaning. The destruction of the Earth is a mathematical inevitability in the long shadow of eons, yet because we are here to witness it, it becomes a catastrophe of infinite proportions. We are the architects of the narrative, even as we are erased by the very forces we have spent centuries learning to calculate. Our ability to comprehend our own dissolution is what grants us a value that transcends the stars. The universe can crush us, it can burn us, and it can cast our remnants into the eternal night, but it cannot understand why. It cannot mourn the loss of the symphony that was human thought. We are the only part of the mechanism that feels the weight of the silence. As we zoom out further, the Earth begins to shrink. It is joined by its sister planets, a handful of dust motes orbiting a mid-sized star on the edge of a nondescript spiral galaxy. We see the solar system for what it truly is, a collection of projectiles moving through a terrifyingly vast abyss. Every planet, every moon, every comet is a stone cast into the dark, governed by the same gravity that now drags the Earth into its new, wobbling orbit. The stability we once took for granted was a rare, fleeting alignment in a history defined by chaos. We were a momentary exception to the rule of entropy. In this realization, there is a certain melancholic optimism. We are a part of the universe that was able to think, to love, and to wonder, if only for a brief, flickering moment in the great epoch of time. Our civilization may be a thin layer of ruins buried under a new geography of ice and fire, but the fact that we existed at all is a miracle of the highest order. We have decoded the light of distant suns and mapped the curvature of space-time. We have reached out into the void and left our mark, however small, upon the tapestry of the cosmos. The needle may have ended our story, but it cannot undo the fact that the story was told. The Earth is now a projectile among projectiles, a world of fire and ice drifting toward an uncertain future. The seasons of our ancestors are gone, replaced by the erratic pulse of a world that has lost its rhythm. The atmosphere will continue to scream, the oceans will continue to wander, and the needle will remain as a silent sentinel of our passing. But as the sun continues its inexorable burn, and the stars continue their distant, silent dance, we remain the only ones who knew the name of the world that was lost. We are the witnesses to the end. The final gaze into the oblivion reveals a terrifying beauty. The Earth, once the centre of our universe, is now just another speck of light in the infinite dark, a fading ember in a furnace that will eventually grow cold. The history of life, of all our triumphs and our failures, is a single heartbeat in the life of a galaxy. We look out into the abyss and see not just the end of our world, but the vastness of the stage upon which we played our part. The void is not empty. It is a canvas of infinite potential, a place where new stars will ignite and new worlds will be born from the remnants of the old. We fade into the silence, but we do so with the knowledge that we were the ones who dared to look into the dark and ask why. The journey into the unknown continues, and the Earth, our lonely broken home, disappears into the eternal embrace of the stars.